Hello, everybody, and welcome to another fun-filled episode of Common Knowledge with me, your host, Kyle Novus. I'm joined
Hi.
today by my co-host, Manny Mraz. How are you doing today, Manny?
Now it's time. Hi.
Oh, now it's time to say
uh,
hi?
Now it's time. I jumped the gun. I was so excited. And also, you almost forgot the name of our podcast, which made me laugh.
I really did. It takes me a moment. It
Welcome
takes me a
to
moment. Something.
Common
Okay,
Knowledge.
so I was doing it for dramatic emphasis. So we're gonna just gloss over that mix-up. One thing that I wanted to talk about today was our lovely, lovely sponsor, Legit MTG. You know what's great, Manny?
What?
$2 shipping. That's right. If you have any singles that you need to get for your Magic deck, whether that means that you are going to be putting together your first Pauper deck or your 13th Pauper deck, or any format for that matter, you can get your singles sent to you for just $2 from Legit MTG. Check out legitmtg.com for that, as well as some fantastic articles written by players just like you.
Yeah, they've got a lot of content on there. The first episode, I didn't know a whole lot about them, so I was kind of just talking out my butt. But I've had a chance to check them out. Their prices are great. They have a lot in stock, a lot of hard-to-find cards, and you can't beat the $2 shipping. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. So, what we're going to do is we're going to jump right into the episode, and we'll take care of some business matters later. This episode, we are going to be talking about the Pauper Challenge that took place this Sunday, which was the 30th of July. This challenge was not really well attended. There were only 62 players total, so it wasn't a fantastic turnout, but we do have the top 32 archetypes here. And it's pretty well spread out. So, Manny, 1 second, let me just go ahead and do a quick run through of these archetypes. This is going to be the lightning round of the episode. So, we have 4 Stompy decks, 4 Dinrovatron decks, 2 Mono Blue Delver, 5 Affinity decks, 3 Blue Black Control decks, 1 Land Spy deck, 1 4-color Familiar, 1 5-color Tron, 2 Boggles, 1 Blue-Red Burn, 3 Blue-Red Delver, 1 Red Aggro, 1 Midnight Gaunt, 1 Tribe Combo, 1 Izzet Blitz, and 1 Blue-Red Control. So I would say that's a pretty even split between a lot of things, wouldn't you, Manny?
Absolutely, yeah. The meta is so diverse. I think other than probably Affinity, Tron, and Stompy, you have a very good likelihood of seeing everything. I would count on seeing those the most often. But I mean, out of those, geez, how many different archetypes did we even have?
Right here,
Two, 12. Like at least I think we have like 17 around that number.
yeah, it's a really, really solid number of archetypes, and there's some decks that you don't always see popping up, like One Land Spy, which is just a crazy combo deck, and even 5-color Tron, 4-color Familiar is still making a bit of a splash. And you also have the blue-red control decks that kind of emerged in the last Pauper Challenge to win, actually showing up here again. So I think that...
Oh. Do you recall how many blue-red control decks you saw in the last Pauper Challenge?
I think it was just the one. I think that otherwise it was a lot of blue-red Delver, but I remember seeing that the one Izzet puzzle deck that was running Flurry of Horns as its win condition, that was the winner for that one.
Gotcha.
And also for this one thing that I would really like to do is congratulate the winner of this week's Pauper Challenge. It's Crimfax. I don't know if I pronounced that right or if you can pronounce that right, but he was playing Stompy. He came in first place, and what I think Manny and I are going to do here is run through just the top 8 decks and kind of give you our impressions, and then at the end of it, we will go ahead and do a final little wrap-up. So, the first deck. Do you have those open there, Manny?
I do, yes.
Okay, cool. So the first deck, like I said, it is indeed a Stompy deck. It is pretty interesting looking. It's basically your standard Stompy deck. The only things that are really different about it are a severe lack of Nettle Sentinel and a noticeable presence of Safe Hold Elite. So for those of you that don't know, Safe Hold Elite is a 2-drop, 1 and a hybrid mana of green or a white, and is a 2/2 with Persist. Why do you think that they would be putting something like Safe Hold Elite into their deck, Manny?
So just really flourish in this especially this kind of deck where you have things coming back to your hand. Rancor, you have another creature with, I believe, Undying. You're really getting a lot of value out of the cards that you have. No one card is particularly powerful in this deck by itself. It's just the recursion. You keep coming back over and over and just smashing face.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. It makes it particularly difficult to get rid of any one threat. And I think that because right now there are just so many removal spells that people are packing, uh, having something with Persist and something with Undying in your deck is going to give you a pretty good advantage against the rest of the field because you're going to keep having a creature on the field and they have to use 2 pieces of removal unless they're running something like Incinerate or Magma Spray.
Right, yeah, exactly. And I mean, those cards, Young Wolf and Safe Hold Elite with a card like Rancor is just, it's brutal. I mean, you have to, when you're taking that much damage every turn from these guys with their enchantments on them, you have to unfortunately 2-for-1 yourself with, a Scred or a Lightning Bolt or something of that nature.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I've actually seen a few decks main decking Incinerate in this past week. So I think that the presence of things like Safe Hold Elite and Young Wolf are really starting to make uh, people a little more leery of this kind of effect. And that
Hmm.
Rancor, I know we mentioned it last week, but that's absolutely brutal. It makes whatever it's attached to the must answer threat. And because it goes right back to your opponent's hand, you really don't have any respite from that card.
Right, yeah, it's one of the weird and rare instances where a 0/1 is all of a sudden relevant.
Exactly. Any other things that you wanted to say about that deck?
No, just that it's very good. If you're looking to get into Pauper, I think this is an amazing place to start. Or if you're looking to switch gears and play something aggressive, I mean, you can't get better than this.
Yeah, I think that Stompy is definitely a great place to enter into the format. It gives you a straightforward deck to learn and kind of become accustomed to, fall back on if need be. And you're able to learn the format without having to go through anything that's too intricate. And speaking of something that is severely intricate, we have our next deck, which came in second place, and it is a Dinrova Tron deck by Big Caban 2. Uh, there's nothing really that surprises me in this Tron deck. Everything in it seems pretty standard. I'm happy to see that it's running a Shattering Pulse in the sideboard. That makes me very happy.
The isn't the I'm sorry, isn't the second place, isn't that Affinity?
No, I have rank 2 as I see fourth place is Affinity, but second place it
Oh,
appears
okay.
to be Tron.
Okay, gotcha. Sorry about the mix-up, guys. Go ahead. Continue.
No, you're good. I'm happy to see that they are running Shattering Pulse. I think that is such a fantastic piece of hate against Affinity, and especially in a Tron deck where you can take advantage of it, because for those of you that don't know, Shattering Pulse is 1 in a red, destroy target artifact, and it has buyback 3. So if you're running the Tron lands, you could easily be casting this twice a turn, blowing up your opponent's mana base, things like that. So I think that's absolutely fantastic.
Nasty.
And otherwise, it's still running your typical 2 Dinrova Horror, which has kind of become the standard. It has an All-Mugs Crusher as well, but nothing too crazy. So let's not dwell there too long. Uh, do you have the third place? It looks like it is Blue Delver.
Take a look here. I do see that. Go ahead.
Okay. I was going to see if you actually wanted to take the lead on this one because you play a lot more Blue Delver than I do. So I wanted to see if you saw anything interesting.
Let me. Where's the that specific list? I'm actually not able to find the links to their lists.
Oh, you're looking at the top archetypes. If you go and look into the right side and scroll down, it'll have Pauper Challenge, which is July 31st. So I actually got that wrong in the beginning of the episode. I said the 30th, so I apologize for that.
Let's see here. Sorry, guys, 1 second.
So while
there
you're
it is.
Oh, you found it?
Okay.
It was hiding on you.
By Brivinex?
Yes.
Cool. Okay, let's take a look. Sorry about that. Okay, so we've got pretty standard Delver. I like that he's playing an Augur of Bolus. That's a little different. I do like the cut down to 3 Spire Golems and 1 Augur. I do think that was one of the things I was really missing playing against Blue-Red Delver. That Augur of Bolus is so great at finding tools. It really just fills your hand with exactly what you're looking for. It's very diverse, and I do think 4 Spire Golems are probably a little excessive. I like that I like that they are playing 2 Dazes. I'm a huge fan of that card. I think if there was one thing the mono blue list I was piloting was lacking something, is definitely Daze. Being tapped out and still able to counter spells is a huge deal, even if it is only important early on in the game.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. Daze is just such a fantastic spell. I mean, Daze is in a lot of legacy tempo decks and even in a few control decks. So it's pretty amazing that we have such a powerful card showing up in this format. I think what's also kind of cool is they have those. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. The other thing I was going to say about Daze is that, you think to yourself kind of, oh, well, it becomes not so important later on in the matchup, which is true. But I think it can be so clutch early on, especially when, like Legacy, another Eternal format, we are trying to play very low to the ground. We try to curve out at 3. 4 is probably the highest we're going to be playing something if we're not playing some kind of silly combo deck. But yeah, Daze is just, it's good in Legacy. It's good here. It's just a great card.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. It's fantastic, especially when your opponent thinks that you're tapped out and you aren't going to be countering their spell. It can take the game back so quickly. So the thing that I find really interesting about this, not just the 1 Augur of Bolus in the main deck, but the 3 in the sideboard is pretty cool for those matchups when you really need to be digging for your hate cards. I think that that's a really, really good idea that's there. Because if you bring in those 2 annuls, you might not see that. But if you have 4 Augur of Bolus, you're definitely going to be having a much easier time digging for that.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing I love from the sideboard is the Frostburn Weird. I love that card. I mean, it was insanely powerful in Theros, and while this format I think is a little higher pace and probably a little more powerful, I think having the ability to have a 4/1 on turn 3 is huge, especially with a tempo deck like this where you're really applying pressure early on.
Yeah, I think that this definitely would help you race against certain decks like Burn or even something like Tribe Combo. If they aren't putting anything down in those first few turns, playing a Frostburn Weird is going to definitely punish them for that.
Right, and I mean, let's not forget that it's a great defensive card as well.
Oh, absolutely. It can block just as easily as it can attack.
All-star.
All-star. Absolutely. So let's is there anything else that you noticed in this deck that you wanted to talk about?
Just how much I love Daze. I mean, if I can cast Daze in a game of Magic, I can go home happy.
Okay, so if you want to make Manny's day, just get him a few copies of Daze and let him cast them against you, and he'll be fine.
I already have a playset. I already have a playset from Nemesis. Get out of here.
I really hope that you actually just keep getting a ton of copies of Daze sent to you now. Okay, so
Decorating my wall.
they're digital copies. Let's go ahead and move on to fourth place. This one is an affinity deck, so this is the one that you might have seen before, Manny. And so far, it kind of looks like it's your standard affinity deck. A lot of decks nowadays, they are not really switching up too much. They're just kind of tweaking the numbers a little bit to fit the metagame, and the one that ends up placing the highest is just the one that's the best tuned, or in some cases, just kind of had the best luck. But it can happen. But being the best tuned is
Yeah.
going to beat luck just about any day. So in this deck, it's really your standard main deck. It is running 2 Gear Seeker Serpent. I've seen that number rise a bit lately with some decks running as much as 4, meaning that it really doesn't have a lot of removal that can hit it. It's only running 1 Fling, so it's not really going for the Atog Fling combo. And yeah, otherwise it seems pretty solid.
I like that. Fling is actually a card that I'm playing right now in Standard, and while it can really catch your opponent off guard, most of the time it's just wasted space in your deck. I think as a one of, it's probably perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that I typically don't prepare for.
Yeah, it's definitely the gotcha card of the deck because you have a very, very hard time predicting a fling, especially when it's just a one of. But I think because people have become so used to seeing like 2 flings in a deck, you can get away with that one because people are going to be thinking of it more frequently. And as
Right.
much as I would say that like a Tog is the best thing to combo off with, I've died to a Carapace Forger being sacrificed to Fling way too often. Uh, it happened to me sometime this week when I was playing a league. I thought that I had them, and then they just sacked their Carapace Forger and killed me with Fling.
Yeah, I mean, calling it a gotcha card, I think, is very accurate, very descriptive. I think one time I defeated an opponent at turn 4 or 5 by attacking and then sacrificing my tapped creature once they tapped out for a Glimmer of Genius for Xaxes, and they just were like, "Oh, okay, next game."
Yeah, and
It's not something you can play around, and if it's something you decide to play around, you're probably going to put yourself behind.
yeah, you can definitely put yourself at a major risk. But just about any time that a Tog's out, if they have artifacts that aren't exactly needed, you kind of have to be worried about that. And that's really the power that Fling and Atog have in the deck where they can force you to play around it.
Right, yeah. Swinging for 5 and then immediately sacking it for the last lethal 5 is very strong.
Yeah, absolutely. And so otherwise in this deck, I think what's interesting, I like that it's using 4 Darksteel Citadel and it's not running Ancient Dens to try and splash white for sideboard hate. Instead, it's using Tranquility for its enchantment hate. And for those of you that aren't aware of Tranquility, it's a 2 and a green, and it destroys all enchantments. It's sorcery, which I think is a pretty big concession right now to exactly how powerful Boggles can be. You need to have some kind of answer to that aura deck.
Right, yeah. I mean, Boggles is tried and true. It's very, very difficult to interact with unless you have a card like Tranquility. I mean, the only other way around that are Edict effects, which if you're not playing black, you're not going to have any of.
Yeah, the only other thing that I can think of is there is like one Edict effect in white that's like attacking or blocking creature, but I forget the exact name of that.
Celestial Flare?
Yes, yes, that's it. You got it. Okay,
That
so
one.
let's go ahead and take a look at the next deck. It's also an affinity deck, so we might just be looking at something very, very similar. So, oh my gosh, this is great. This kind of proves the point that Manny and I were just talking about with Fling. This deck is running absolutely 0 copies of Fling. And instead, it's using Teamer Battle Rage. But I'm sure that people who are playing against this, we're probably playing around a fling at times without it even being there.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm sure of it. It's one of those cards that once you get in your head and you think your opponent has it, it just won't leave you alone.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So there's nothing really super interesting other than that. So we're not going to
I mean,
spend too much time, unless
yeah,
you
I
saw
mean,
something.
yeah, I mean, just the Teamer Battle Rage. I mean, that card is so great. It's so powerful. You can come from behind and just deal so much damage. I mean, obviously, you wait till blockers have been declared, and then just get in for so much more damage than your opponent was counting on.
Yeah, I think that this has made a big splash with Is It Blitz and also in Affinity. So it seems that Teamer Battle Rage is becoming quite the card as of late.
Right? And I mean, not counting Frogmite, you are dealing, a minimum of 4 extra damage with an unblocked creature. So I think that if you look at it as another Galvanic Blast with, a kind of sucky condition to be played, it's still a good card.
Yeah, but it can
Great
definitely
card.
finish out those matches. So Bling, absolutely fantastic, and apparently it's fantastic even if you don't have it. So let's move on to sixth place. Was a Tron deck. Um, so this is another Dinrova Tron. This one does not have any copies of Olamog's Crusher in it. Instead, it's running 3 Dinrova Horror. And otherwise, it doesn't look like there's anything too crazy about it. Yeah, it's kind of your standard Tron deck. Nothing really super special, nothing that we didn't talk about in our last mention of Tron. So next we have Stompy one more time in 7th place. And I'm kind of amazed here, Manny. These people came to the same conclusion with Safe Hold Elite.
Oh wow, that maybe it was something that some people got a hold of just a little bit before we did.
Yeah, I think that that's a really interesting piece of tech. If you are going to be running Stompy anytime soon, you might want to look at taking out Nettle Sentinel for Safe Hold Elite. I think that you're absolutely sacrificing some of your speed, but you're going to be a lot more resistant to removal. Uh, I know I was looking at an article earlier today where they were talking about this shift, and the author didn't
Hmm.
particularly care for it. They thought that it was a situation where they were limiting their aggro ability when that's really the strongest part of the deck. And I'm not sure about you, but I think I disagree with that. I think that this is actually a really good idea to be playing a
I
Safe Hold
do
Elite right now.
I do as well, and for 2 reasons. So I think the recursion, number one, is the biggest, and I think the other part is that you're playing 12 one-drops. So the fact that you're playing a one-drop on turn one is going to happen for you fairly regularly without the Nettle Sentinels. So I do think you're going to lose a little bit of speed, but not enough to cry about. The other thing that I really love about Safe Hold Elite is that it plays off of Burning Tree Emissary, and you're not in essence just wasting that mana on turn two. I mean, not that that's always going to happen, not that you should count on that, but it is, I feel like a turn one Young Wolf into a turn two BTE into Safe Hold gets you right back where you were, right back into the game, and doesn't lose you that much.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty strong start. And realistically, it's not even just 12. It's actually, you're looking at 15. This person's running 3 Vault Scourge.
Oh,
And
right. Yes.
that can potentially be a 1-drop if you need it to be. And that's really the only way that you're playing it since you're not running black mana in
Yeah.
this deck.
By potentially, if you mean
I mean, always.
only, yeah, only and always, then yes.
So, thank you for the correction. Otherwise, I think that it's pretty normal Stompy deck. They just got a hold of that idea, and I think that if you're playing Stompy right now, especially with so much removal in the metagame and people trying to pull off these blue-red control decks and black-blue control decks, the more resilience that you can have to removal, the better off you are. So, in our 8th place here, rounding out our top 8, we have one last Tron deck. Tron Once again, I think that it's just tried and true. It's the same thing. No Olmog's Crusher, instead just 3 Dinrova Horror. I think I like that more, honestly.
Do you explain that to me? Is the main reason I haven't played very much Tron? I'm trying to stay away from it. It looks disgusting. Is because I think that card is just so bad. I hate it. I hate it. I don't want to touch it. I don't want to cast it. I mean, why is it so good? Why is it so much better than Ulamog's Crusher?
So I think particularly in this deck, it is fantastic because you have so much mana to use on it. Uh, it is a very slow way to close out the game, but specifically if you're looking at this list in particular, it's running 2 Mnemonic Walls, and it's running 2 copies of Ghostly Flicker, as well as 2 copies of Mystical Teachings. So
Okay,
the
I do
combo
like.
that occurs here is just it is just disgusting because you are going to have 1 Ghostly Flicker in your graveyard, and you're targeting a Dinrova Horror and the Mnemonic Wall with your Ghostly Flicker. So you get back another Ghostly Flicker, and you're bouncing one of your opponent's permanents
Okay.
and making them discard a card. So it can easily dismantle your opponent's board, and it's a pretty powerful lock, especially when part of that is a 4/4 creature and the other is a 0/4. The only removal that's really going to be doing that is a Flame Slash or unconditional kill spells.
I'd say Scred can get in there as well.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Thank you.
Well, how soft is this combo to counterspell?
I don't think that it's very soft at all, particularly because this deck just runs so much to deny your opponents from doing what they want to do. It's running 2 Excludes, it's running 2 Condescends, and I don't know. I really just don't think it's that weak, especially because you're running like Pulse of Marasa, Mystical Teachings, things like that. You can loop this pretty easily, and you can get the pieces that you need
Okay.
to acquire to make this work. And you can really grab whatever you need to keep yourself alive in doing this.
So then you know the other side of that coin. What is Dinrovatron bad to?
So Dinrovatron
What is it?
is what are its bad matchups? I
Yes,
think
what are its bad matchups? Thank you. I wanted to say it so badly.
well, you said it, so you're good. I think its bad matchups are really highly aggressive decks or decks that can afford the tempo loss in order to target its land base. I think the extreme example of this is that Sultai land destruction deck that we looked at last week.
Mm-hmm.
That's just going to blow up any Tron land in sight.
Mm-hmm.
If you're able to afford to run like a full set of Choking Sands in your sideboard, or just about any other land destruction spell, even a Seize Claim is going to get the job done. That's where it's going to be very weak. Otherwise, if you can get in there quick with an aggressive deck like Mono Red, then I think you're pretty well set.
Would you say that Stompy is fast enough?
I think that Stompy probably has what it needs, especially because Stompy tends to sideboard a whole playset of Gleeful Sabotage, and this deck doesn't tend to run a whole lot of colored mana outside of like Dimmer Signet and playing things like Prophetic Prism. So if you're able to destroy its access to color, then you're in a pretty good place. Plus, you also do have just enough creatures to push through this.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Answer my questions. You pass.
Okay. The only big part of it is it does run Moment's Peace, so you are going to have to be dealing with that if you are playing a creature strategy. So the best way to really take care of this is always going to be land destruction. Tron just has access to huge amounts of mana otherwise, and it can be pretty hard for just about any deck to deal with it.
Gotcha. Yeah, it does. I mean, from looking at it and the way you describe it, it does seem like just a very large control deck with a lot of power behind it.
Yeah, I think that versatility is kind of the name of the game with Tron because it can afford to run just a 2 set of something and still fetch it with mystical teachings and all of its card draw and bringing things back from the graveyard. It tends to work very, very well, and it can be a bit of a monster when you're playing against it.
Gotcha.
Okay,
Well,
so
that's going to be next on my list of things to play. I'm definitely going to have a report about that next week.
okay, sounds good. I'm going to hold you to it. So, are there any other decks that you find really interesting in this top 32?
Um, well, I think funny enough, one of the decks that's on there we're going to be talking about in our combo segment, which I guess might as well just bring up now. Midnight Gong, correct?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
So we'll talk about that one in a little bit. There's one other combo deck that I really want to talk about because I've tried to wrap my head around it. It makes absolutely no sense how this thing came in 17th place. So congratulations to Air Farmer. This thing is just beautiful. One Land Spy. For those of you who don't know what One Land Spy is, and I understand how it works, but at the same time, I don't understand how it works, if that makes any kind of sense. So the goal of this thing is basically to get rid of a bunch of creatures, put them in your graveyard, use something like Songs of the Damned to build a ton of mana, and play Karavek's Torch, something like that. It is just absolutely disgusting, especially because you're able to run Morgue Theft in this, so you are cycling a ton of creatures into your graveyard, casting Songs of the Damned to get a ton of mana, using Morgue Theft to bring them back, cycle them again to get more combo pieces, and it just keeps on going until you can just cast something that is incredibly powerful straight at your opponent's face.
It's very ridiculous. I think the kind of people who like to play this are the same legacy players who do not like to pass the turn.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. Like, I think that this deck is really, really cool. It's awesome that somebody put the time in to get this through a Pauper challenge, and so absolutely congratulations. Anything that can run one land and still be successful is just outstanding. So,
I'm sure. I was gonna say with the diversity of this format, I am sure this guy would pay to see the look on his opponent's faces.
Ooh, absolutely. And I think what kind of puts it in a good place right now is exactly what we were talking about before, the abundance of creature removal. Because there's so much creature removal in this format that to play a deck where you are really not playing a lot of creatures to the board, and instead you are just cycling them and playing instants and sorceries, I think that that's amazing. Like, that is exactly what a combo deck needs to be doing right now. And we're going to be talking about a few combo decks right in a moment. Were there any other decks that you thought were particularly interesting, Manny?
No.
No. Very decisive no. I like it. Okay. So now we're going to take a short break from talking about Pauper to give a big thank you to our network, Constructed Criticism. We have 3 podcasts total on this network now. We have Common Knowledge, we have Limited Time Only, and we have Constructed Criticism. And the gentleman that is in charge of this network, Spencer Howland, he has been fantastic in getting this set up for us and doing a great job. If you want to donate to Constructed Criticism Network as a whole, please check out the Constructed Criticism Patreon. They do have various donation tiers so that if you are looking for access to some of their Pro Tour testing, some extra content, things like that, they'll have it for you at those donation tiers. And if you are looking for a particular type of podcast at this point, chances are we have it for you. We have everything from Constructed to Limited to now Pauper. Also, if you would like to donate to this particular podcast, you can check out our Patreon page, Common Knowledge on Patreon. Just search us, you'll find it. You can also check us
I
out
think
on our Facebook page.
the main reason to donate to us, I found out today, is
Mhm.
Kyle doesn't have HBO Go. Like, this is the most unreal thing. He's a college student, so he can't afford it. I'm just like blown away right now. So somebody give this guy $15 a month so he can watch Game of Thrones. He's like never seen it. It's ah.
I've I'm sorry, I just haven't had the time or money to do it, but
Oh my! It's $15 a month. Okay,
I don't have $50. If we get to $15 a month, I will watch Game of Thrones.
okay.
Okay,
I'll give you
that's
my
the
share.
deal.
I'll give you my share up to $15 a month so you can watch TV.
Okay, so that's the deal. I guess that is our first donation goal, is to get me HBO Go so I can watch Game of Thrones. Apparently, it's a mortal sin. But otherwise, I think the main reason is if you really appreciate what we are doing here and feel that it is worth some kind of monetary amount to you, we really ask that you express that through donation to us. But I do want to make it abundantly clear that regardless of monetary donation or not, your support just through watching this podcast means the world to us and
Yes.
will not go forgotten. So if you cannot donate, that is fine. Just keep watching, listening, what have you, and we would absolutely appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, with you guys listening to my bumbling and stumbling, I feel like I should be paying you. So thank you.
Exactly. This is fantastic for Manny. He doesn't get to talk so much. So let's move on to our next section. We're going to be talking about combo decks today. And particularly because combo decks are those decks in this format where they can get you out of nowhere if you don't know what they are doing. I think Spencer had a post on Facebook today or the other day about not understanding a card interaction and then having it work against you, and you will forever remember what that card does.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
That is exactly what these decks are, and we want to make sure that you are prepared to either play them or take them down so that they do not become the card that you have to remember forever because they got you terribly that one time.
Yeah. You don't want to lose just because you didn't know what it did. It's the most infuriating thing. I mean, it's not. I mean, typically it's not an Etherling type effect where it's just unkillable. It's just you didn't know. You didn't know what could happen to you.
Exactly. So we have 5 decks that we wanted to discuss today. 3 that are major players in the metagame right now, and 2 that are kind of personal picks that Manny and I made that could be popping up a little bit here and there and could be making a bit of a mark on leagues as you go ahead. So the first deck that we're going to be talking about is it Blitz? And Manny's played a lot of this deck, right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, a pretty decent amount. A lot more than none.
So what is it that makes this deck tick?
So, I mean, we discussed it last week a bit, but I think we're gonna really sink our teeth in. So the entire combo is based around Kiln Fiend and Nivik Cyclops. So these cards both Kiln Fiend gets +3/+0 for each instant or sorcery you cast. Nivik Cyclops also gets +3/+0 until end of turn, and you don't care about that because that didn't matter for you anyway. So what you're trying to do is just play an exorbitant amount of instant and sorceries. They are all typically one. They cost 1, and some have flashback like Artful Dodge, which also makes your creature unblockable. You have Gataxian Probes, so you can just pump them, pump them, pump them. Lightning Bolts, Mutagenic Growths, again, you're paying 2 life to do an additional 5 damage to your opponent. Ponder, Preordain, Spell Pierce, Apostle's Blessing, which in a combo deck like this is, I mean, it's really what you have to combat your opponent's removal. And then the piece de resistance of this whole thing is, again, an all-star card, Teamer Battle Rage, where, you're attacking your opponent for, you think, or they think 10, which turns into a quick and instant lethal damage. It is just an amazing card. And you're playing Gush with it as well to keep, fueling yourself. Like we discussed, this deck is very, very low to the ground. Your most expensive creature is a Nivik Cyclops at colorless, a blue, and a red. It's a 1/4 defender. but it has that ability that makes it able to attack and just pumps it, makes it so huge so fast. One of the things I've seen a couple of decks do, this one is playing Augur of Bolus, which I really like. I really agree with if you're trying to look for that Teamer Battle Rage or Apostle's Blessing to either close out the game or just protect the threat. It's really great for those things. But I've also seen them play things like Delver, which is I think a good idea as well. It applies pressure to your opponent. It makes them use their removal on your Delver if it really starts laying down the beats. And it's sure to flip when you're playing 31 or so instant and sorceries.
Yeah, I think that the Augur of Bolus in here is actually pretty amazing, because if you think about it, it is just replacing itself for a card that's going to buff your Nivix Cyclops or Kiln Fiend.
Yeah, I think the question of Delver Augur is really up to the player and how they want to play. I think you'd be solid with either. I would probably choose Augur with how versatile, how much more versatile that makes you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a good point with the Teamer Battle Rage. Too often you get attacked by a Nivix Cyclops and you think, oh, I'm just going to get hit for 10. I can survive until next turn, and I can figure out this problem then. It gives me an extra turn. And no, it doesn't. If you see a Nivix Cyclops attacking you and you have anything on the board to block it, chances are you should be blocking it, because there's enough instants in this deck where it can go from being a 4/4 to hitting you for 20 damage that it's too consistent, really, for you to gamble with not blocking it.
Right. Even if they don't have a Teamer Battle Rage, you could play Gitaxian Probe, Mutagenic Growth, that's already, 5/8, and an Apostle's Blessing, or returning 2 islands to your hand with Gush. So we're talking about 10 damage while using literally no mana.
Yeah. And I mean, Gitaxian Probe, it is a sorcery, so they are going to be doing that while they attack. Yeah. But
good point.
Between Mutagenic Growth and Apostle's Blessing alone, that's a lot of damage, and that's a lot of surprise damage that they can be getting at you, and then followed up by Gush. So they play a lot of free cards, so it's good to be a little overly careful. If I was trying to beat this deck, Manny, let's say that I was really gunning for Izzet Blitz, like it was the top deck in the format. What cards do I want to be having in my deck, or do I want to be putting in my sideboard?
I believe Edict effects. So Augur of Bolus will get in the way of that, but oftentimes you will only see a lone Kiln Fiend or a lone Nivix Cyclops. You might see 2. It really depends, but you want to be playing removal heavy decks. You want to be playing cards that instantly kill creatures. I mean, their toughness is typically not an issue, with Kiln Fiend being a 1/2 and Nivix Cyclops being a 1/4. A Scred will take care of either of those. Lightning Bolt will take care of Kiln Fiend. There's a lot of things you can do. You can definitely bounce them as well after they've blown their whole hand on making these monstrous, and just take it away.
Yeah, I think that bounce spells are particularly powerful. Because the Nivix Cyclops is just too big for most removal. Kiln Fiend you can obviously hit. But I think things like Vapor Snag are going to be really, really powerful. Otherwise, you need unconditional removal to take care of some of these creatures, or things like Scred, obviously, will work. I think that, and this is, some of these decks are the rare exceptions to the rule where fog effects aren't typically great. I think that against Kiln Fiend and Nivix Cyclops, I think fogging them is actually a possible answer, especially if you're playing something like Stompy, and this is a major threat for you. That might be one of the best answers that you have, something like Tangle.
I agree with that on a fundamental level, but I mean, morally, I don't think I can cast a fog.
I understand that.
I can't fit that in my 75. How would I sleep at night? How would I kiss my wife?
So the only thing that I have as testimony on my part, I actually play one of the next decks that we are going to be talking about quite a bit. And I have lost several games because I've emptied my hand and been fogged. It happens.
Sure,
And
yeah,
when
I
it
mean,
happens, it's
yeah.
terrible.
I think you're more likely to get fogged in Pauper than probably any other format.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because there's just so many different ones. Uh, so while I appreciate your moral upstanding, if I'm playing green and I don't have an option, I'm still probably going to have one fog effect in my sideboard for these decks.
Continue.
You can yell at me after the show.
Okay.
So next we have the deck that I was just actually kind of talking about in passing, Inside Out Combo. So Inside Out Combo was Manny's unfortunate introduction to this format, and it's also one of my favorite decks because I think it is just tremendously high skilled. It has a very, very high ceiling on it. If you are good with it, then you can really go places with it. There are some individuals who are consistently 5-0ing leagues like 2 or 3 times a week just with this deck. So the basis of this one is pretty simple. You play Tireless Tribe. It's a 1-drop, 1/1 creature, and it's played for 1 white. You discard a card. Tireless Tribe gets +0, +4 until end of turn. So that's not really that great. You just have a big defender. Until you play Inside Out, which is a 2-drop. It's 1 colorless and 1 hybrid mana of red or blue. And you switch target creature's power and toughness until end of turn and draw cards, so it cantrips. So if you're able to do this and discard 5 cards, you are hitting your opponent for 21 damage. And it's all backed up by search spells like Brainstorm, protection spells like Dispel, and Circular Logic, which is fantastic. And in order to get through your opponents, you're playing something called Shadow Rift, so your creature gets Shadow until end of turn, and you get to draw a card. So there's kind of a theme among all of it. You need at least a 5-card hand most of the time to defeat your opponent, but there's a lot that this deck has to work with.
It sounds daunting, but having played against this deck, I can tell you that it's not. It's a very common thing for the person piloting it to be able to just go from 2 to 3 cards in hand to be able to dig and find all of those 5. I mean, and Gush is just such a centerpiece. It plays well in many decks, but it plays so wonderfully in this one because you do have that same Is It Blitz style, playing Gush, nets you more cards. But on top of that, you're also returning islands, so another finite 2 cards to discard to your hand.
Which I think it's interesting because the card actually draws you 2 cards and you're returning 2 islands. So Circular Logic represents 4 cards in hand when you're going to combo off.
You mean Gush?
Gush. Sorry. Thank you.
That's okay.
Circular Logic.
I messed up earlier.
Okay, we're even. Circular Logic,
Even.
though, is actually the other card that I think just is an all-star in this deck. For those of you that haven't seen it and did not play when Psychotog was dominating the format, Circular Logic is a 3-drop. It's 2 and a blue, counter target spell unless its controller pays 1 for each card in your graveyard. But it has a madness cost of 1 blue. So if somebody goes for a spell that's going to kill your Tireless Tribe, discard that and counter their spell for only 1 blue mana. It's really, really amazing. It's the best protection card that the deck runs outside of like Prismatic Strands.
So, I mean, realistically, it looks like what this card reads to me is counter target spell unless its controller pays 6 or 7.
Yeah, a lot of the time in this deck, because most people are not going to be bringing in Graveyard Hate against this deck, that's not the most effective way to attack it. Yeah, you're really going to have to pay like 6 or 7 in order to get your removal spell through. And
then
oh, go ahead.
Oh no, please finish.
Since this is a counterspell that has madness on it, this is likely the last card that your opponent is going to have in their hand. So if you are suspecting that they might have a circular logic when you are playing against tribe combo like this, uh, wait until they've discarded everything before you use your removal spell. So that's all that I got. What did you have to say?
Okay. I was gonna say one of the things I really like about this combo deck is that even though you're only playing for Tyler's Tribe, where I very often dislike combo decks that play, with one key creature, with how big Tyler's Tribe's butt is and how much disruption you're playing. You're playing things like Circular Logic, you're playing Dispel. All of these really add up to a very consistent combo. If you know how to play the deck well, pilot it well, and you're doing what you're supposed to, that combo is eventual. It's very little is left to chance.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because unless you are comboing off, you're really protected from lightning bolts because you can just discard a card at any point in time to protect yourself against a lightning bolt. So it's pretty resilient. If you're looking for a combo deck to play in the format, I would probably say that these first two that we talked about are your best bets.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
So let's move on to our last three, which are a little more questionable, but just as fun and just as combo-y. In third, we have Midnight Gaunt. So, Manny, I kind of want you to talk about Midnight Gaunt for a bit here.
Oh my gosh, I really don't want to, but okay. So this deck, I piloted it earlier today. It is, I think, very well thought out, but the concepts that you're using to win are, um, they're very anti-spiky when you take a look at it and when you play it, even though they work and they're effective. So you're playing the Gaunt combo deck. I'll explain the combo first. You're playing 4 Midnight Guard. It's a 2/3 creature for 2 and a white. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, it untaps. The other part of the combo is Presence of Gaunt. It's a green enchantment, 2 and 1 green. Whenever you tap a creature, you bring a 1/1 elf into play. So infinite creatures. That's how you win. Um, but you're thinking, oh, well, this combo doesn't sound.
Oh, you okay, Manny? You froze on me. Okay, so I'm not exactly sure what happened to Manny there. So I'm going to keep going on with our Gaunt combo deck, and hopefully he will be back with us shortly once whatever it is sorted out. It just appears to be that he froze. So the Gaunt combo deck, what you are really looking to do is get those two cards together, get infinite creatures, and swing in for the win, potentially using a card like Rally the Peasants, which is creatures you control get +2/+0 until end of turn. It's been in a few dredge decks throughout history. It's a pretty strong card, and it goes well with tokens, especially if you're trying to play this deck online. It's a lot easier if you are playing something like Rally the Peasants rather than having to create 100 elf tokens to attack. You might not have to make as many. It can save you some time because those seconds on the clock really do matter with this deck. Uh, the game that Manny and I played, where he played this, it was not great only because the deck spends a significant amount of time dirtling about. It doesn't have any draw potential really, so it's looking to just naturally draw into its combo pieces, which is just exceptionally difficult for the deck. Uh, and in order to do that, you are kind of dirtling around using life gain like Soul Warden and Soul's Attendant, which creates a lot of life using the other cards in the deck, like uh, you're playing Battle Screech, which gets you 2 white bird tokens, or Sends Enlistment, which gets you 2 white Kithkin soldier tokens. So the deck definitely has a lot of time to dirtle around. It can be problematic. I think that the decks that this is really good against are things like Burn or potentially Tron, where you have the time to dirtle around and do what you need to do to get this combo together, because otherwise it just takes far too long. If you are playing against this deck, uh, I think that Electrickery is an okay option, if only because most of the cards in the deck, other than Midnight Guard, are 1/1s. But if you are looking to really beat this, you have to make sure that you're killing that Midnight Guard or getting rid of that Presence of Gaunt. It looks like Manny is back. He said that his Chrome crashed, so welcome back, Manny. How's it going?
It's going well. I've never said anything bad about Chrome, and I'm not about to start, but that was unfortunate.
Fair enough. So I was just telling people a little bit about the combo. I mentioned how it dirtles around a little bit, and
Oh,
I was
so
moving on
much.
to a little
Okay.
bit of how you should play against it.
Mm. So, it can really get out of hand with how much life it is. Every time I thought I was dead, bam, four more life, four more life, four more life. It was just a non-stop trickle of life. I think in one of our games that we played, I gained somewhere in the realm of 40 life, where I beat you and you had 2 Gurmag Anglers and 2 Ulumog's Crushers. I think that says it all. The deck can just kind of dirtle around and just kind of putt and do pretty much nothing until you win. It is, yeah.
Yeah, pretty
I
good.
mean, yeah, the flag bearer and the creature, I don't remember, benevolent bodyguard. Boy, they are so clutch in securing that combo. Unless your opponent is playing counter spells, and they can directly counter the Gond. There's not a lot you can do about that. Those
Yeah,
creatures will keep everybody safe and in play and keep the game rolling. Grinding on. I'm going to say grinding on. It doesn't roll on.
yeah, it's definitely a grindy deck. It's so focused on that life gain, though. I mean, even if you look in the mana base, it's running Colony Garden, which, if you are playing Colony Garden, basically you need to read this as put a 0/1 green plant token creature onto the battlefield and gain anywhere from 1 to 3 life.
Yeah, I mean, most things you're doing are netting you or are gaining you a minimum of 1 life. And I wish I was putting it mildly. You're on the same kind of plan that you're on with Soul Sisters in Modern, except you don't have a big threat. You don't have, these giant outrageous monsters you can't make your board state grow. You're really just kind of hanging in there and not letting your opponent win until you can combo off and win.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll give it that. Um, Really, it's the directed damage against the Midnight Guard that you need to get in order to stop the combo from going off. I don't
Hmm.
really see this deck, and this is something that Manny and I discussed, that we don't really see this deck being super spiky. Uh, it's not
Yes.
great just because it takes so much time is part of it, that in Magic Online, when you're being timed, time is really a factor in
Yes.
this
Yeah.
deck. And
Uh,
I just don't see it doing a lot against decks that are heavy in removal or have ways of countering things. And I think that a lot of decks are
that's
both of those right now.
Yes, yeah, everybody's doing both of those things. And I mean, the other part of kind of what I discussed, why I brought in Tireless Tribe, is the fact that it is a 0/4 makes that deck at least 4 times better than this deck. Because, I mean, you are playing a 2/3 which dies to, you know, almost everything. All of the most played removal in the format, it's going to die to.
Yeah, and I think the big difference is also that Tribe Combo is actually going ahead and playing blue, so it can draw into things a little bit better through like Brainstorm, Preordain, and all of its cantrips. Where this is just naturally trying to draw into its combo, and that
It took
takes a really, really long time.
Yes, yeah, it took a painful amount of time. And the other thing I mean, I think the deck is pretty good, but the thing I hated about it the most was being almost unable to enact any of my will. I was really reactive. I just had to kind of figure out how to stay alive, how to jam you up until I could do what I wanted to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the big thing if you are playing against this deck to do is definitely the targeted removal against the Midnight Guard. Um, Possibly Electrickery. The biggest warning that I have to give is this deck does tend to run Spider Silk Armor, and just the list that I'm looking at right now has 3 of them in its sideboard. So if they see red, chances are they're going to be bringing in Spider Silk Armor, uh, which is going to make your Electrickery useless.
Well, and not to mention, Electricity is not a very good card against this because the actual implementation of the combo, the Midnight Guard is a 2/3. Electricity does nothing for that. It just staves off your death for a turn. So I mean, if you're looking for a fog type effect, then that's basically what's gonna happen for you.
Yeah, that's what you get out of Electrickery, and we know how much Manny hates fog. So,
That card was so good when I was 10.
Okay, so moving right along, the next deck that we're going to be talking about is Reanimator. So Reanimator is kind of on an odd portion of the spectrum when it comes to combo decks. The most common version that I've been seeing lately is Grixis Reanimator. Now, Reanimator obviously ends up utilizing the graveyard, which is part of the problem. There's a lot of graveyard hate running around. Relic of Progenitus is a very real threat in the format, and a lot of colors have on-color responses to the graveyard. So, this deck, the goal is to discard Olamog's Crusher really early, which is an 8/8 with Annihilator 2 that has to attack each turn if able. So it's a good card if it gets down really early and starts blowing up plans, which is quite possible because you're discarding it using something like Careful Study. And also, you're playing Dragon Breath, which Enchanted Creature has haste. And if Dragon Breath is in your graveyard and a creature that has a mana cost of 6 or more comes into play, you get to attach it to that creature for free from your graveyard. So that potentially translates to if you Careful Study turn 1, discarding Dragon's Breath and Olamog's Crusher, and then Exhume turn 2, you're swinging in on turn 2 with an 8/8 with Annihilator 2.
Yeah, and I mean, I think ideally that's what you would wish to happen. I think realistically and practically, something like that's not going to happen that fast for you. Usually, the deck is good. It's very powerful, but I think it takes a while to really get going.
Yeah, I think that it takes a while to get going. The other problem is that Olamog's Crusher just dies to Doomblade, is another huge issue. You're also playing around a lot of counter magic to get that Exhume played. And I think the final nail in the coffin, I played this deck through a league earlier this week. And actually, it was late last week. And the other person was playing a blue-black control deck with Striped Riverwinder. Now, Striped Riverwinder has cycling for 1 blue. So anytime that I would cast Exhume, Striped Riverwinder got put into the graveyard, brought back to my opponent's side of the field, and they now have a 5/5 hexproof, and they just Doomblade my Olamog's Crusher. I think
Seems like a
that
very
kind of
powerful
stuff.
spot to be in.
Yeah, I think the cycling effects that came out in Amonkhet and Hour of Devastation have kind of made this not as great of a deck. Plus all of the graveyard hate in Relic of Progenitus. It's a good deck when everything works, but as Manny said, it doesn't work perfectly all the time. You're usually looking at more like a turn 4 or 5 Olamog's Crusher, and in this format, when people are flooding the board, it's not going to be enough.
Yeah, it definitely may not be. And I mean, with decks that are playing blue, and I mean, it's not, we don't necessarily want to play it dies to Doomblade, or it can be Vapor Snag, but when these things are relevant and they're happening all the time, that Ulamog's Crusher back in your hand is pretty debilitating.
Yeah, between Vapor Snag and Doomblade, there's just so much that is out there. And you have to think that you're kind of putting like 3 cards into this at least.
Yeah. I mean, the payoff is definitely there. It's definitely worth it.
Mhm.
If you can have an Ulamog's Crusher on turn 4, I would say you are very far ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. But there is always that danger. And if you are going to be playing this, be aware. I think that you should probably be putting in counter spells. I think things like Turn Aside might even be an option. It's 1 blue to counter a spell that's targeting a creature you control. So I think that stuff like that is probably going to be needed if you plan on playing this. Okay, so the last deck that we wanted to talk about, breezing right through Reanimator, is taking a look at Tandem Archer Storm. So, uh, Manny, how do you feel about this deck?
So I unfortunately didn't have time to play it this week, but looking at it, it looks so sweet. It looks like a lot of fun. It looks like a pseudo storm of combo deck where we don't have grape shot. We don't get to live the dream, but we can come relatively close where we can play these cantrips, we can play these spells that draw you cards and net you mana, all the while doing 1, 2, or 3 damage with your archers and your the other guy, Firebrand Archer, and what was the other creature?
Thermal Alchemist.
Alchemist, yeah. I mean, you're tapping and untapping those guys and dealing, what could be an insane amount of damage for playing cantrips.
Yeah, it's an interesting deck. I unfortunately had to play this deck throughout the week. I decided to do some research and see if it was good. Because I saw somebody 5-0 a league with a version of it. I definitely understand why they have the version that they have now. I think that the deck is great. The problem with it is creature removal is the big part. Just about everything kills it because Tandem Lookout and Firebrand Archer are both 1 toughness creatures. So Electricity could take both of them out.
Right.
Lightning Bolt can take out your Thermo Alchemist, and it seems that people are aware enough of what is available out there that if they see red, blue, and then you drop a Thermo Alchemist or a Firebrand Archer, they are gunning for that immediately.
So,
So
after listening to what you have to say, I changed my mind, and this deck is bad. This deck sucks. I would never good on paper in a vacuum.
it's in a vacuum, it looks awesome. The problem is when playing it, you need 2 creatures to really combo off, or you need to have Ophidian Eye, which is an enchantment, which leaves you open to being 2 for 1. And the payoff isn't really there.
It seems like from what you're describing that you will just be stuck with an empty board and lots of cantrips that do nothing.
If things don't work out well for you, which a lot of times they don't, you're basically just watching your opponent solitaire you to death. And if you do get to live the dream, even for a turn, the thing that tends to happen if you start using Desperate Rituals and Rite of Flame, Seething Song, what ends up happening is you just fizzle out. There is, even with the Tandem Lookout, you don't have enough to keep going, and you end up just fizzling out eventually. Which it might be that somebody has to find just the right combination of cards, the right numbers for this. But from what I've seen, it doesn't look very good. The versions of the deck that are going to work are the ones that are kind of playing the control side of things by using removal and cantrips, but not using rituals.
Gotcha. Okay. Well,
So
I'm not going to play that then. I don't want to play that. I'll focus my efforts on Dinrovatron.
Yeah, I'll save everyone the difficulty there. If you want to try it and you want to experiment with it, go ahead. I don't think that anything is really there because if you do go the controlling route, you're bringing in counter spells, and if you try to combo off, you can't really use those counter spells in your combo, so you're kind of defeating yourself.
Right. Okay. Gotcha.
Okay, so was there anything else with combo decks that you wanted to talk about, man?
Nope.
Okay, so that takes us out of our topic for this week and kind of brings us into our closings here. Were there any shout-outs that you had this week, Manny?
Yes. Yeah, I've got 2 shout outs to my buddy Roger, my buddy Ryan. You guys are great. I like talking to you, like playing with you, Magic, all that stuff. You guys are awesome.
Okay, cool. I'd like to give a shout out to my brother who does have HBO Go. I want him to feel very guilty. And I have been playing a bunch of Overwatch with him this week. And that's been kind of a good break from all the Magic stuff they end up doing. I think that's the only person this week. So, if I was looking to get in touch with you, say I was a detective of sorts, and I needed more information on the Pauper format for one of my cases, and you were the expert, how could I get in touch with you, man?
You can find me on Facebook. My name on there is Manny Meraz, MNNYMERAZ.
Okay, cool. And if you are looking for me because you are not a detective, then you can find me either on Facebook. My name is Kyle Novis, Kyle. Last name is Novis. Or you can find me on Twitter at Kyle_Novus. Same spelling. And you can also find me on the Constructive Criticism Facebook page or the Common Knowledge Facebook page. Other than that, you can also find me on my Twitch accounts, Cursed Lono. I stream mostly on Thursdays and Fridays. Now, if you like this show, if you like shows like this show, if you like the Constructed Criticism Network, and if you like people who enjoy enunciating large words into microphones, please consider subscribing on iTunes to our feed. By doing this, this gives us the opportunity to appear higher up the list so other people can find this fantastic content that you found.
Makes us seem better than we are.
We're great. We're great. Don't be a Debbie Downer like that. Okay. So, anything that I forgot, Manny?
HBO Go, Game of Thrones. Nope, that's it. Oh wait, no, I've got one. So we almost cut the getting to know each other. So one thing you guys probably don't know is that Kyle and I don't actually know each other. We've talked on the internet like 4 times probably. So we don't know each other. Yeah, I figured we'd get to know each other and ask each other like a question. My question to you this week is, what's your favorite sad movie?
Ooh, my favorite sad movie.
Yeah, like or it could also be the saddest movie you've ever seen. Either or.
I think that my favorite. Oh, this is hard. I think my favorite sad movie is a weird one. It's actually Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
I've never seen it.
It's a fantastic movie. It's based on a book written by Hunter S. Thompson.
Sure.
And it has Johnny Depp in it. The movie is tremendously sad only because it's
don't spoil it.
It's extraordinarily hollow feeling.
Okay. I'll take that.
That's the way to that I can best describe it. It leaves you just feeling burnt out at the end. So if you're looking for a movie that's going to make you feel kind of burnt out and like you went on a journey, check out Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Okay. All right. I do need to watch that. I'm actually like a big movie buff, big time cinephile, and I've never seen it. You go. You ask me one. Go ahead.
Oof. Gosh. I had a list for this. Actually, yeah, what kind of music do you listen to? Artist
mostly,
or genre?
Mostly 80s pop.
80s pop.
Yeah,
Why
like
80s pop?
it's just the best. I mean, I love that the synthesizers sound like little cheap Casios, and I love the typically how upbeat the music is, even with new wave, right? New wave is like such a sad genre, but they just make it sound so ecstatic and energetic, and you just want to just love it. You just want to just hungry like a wolf.
Okay, awesome. So last week I tried to come up with my own cool sign off line, and I know Manny was upset because he wanted to have a cool sign off line. So, Manny, give me your coolest sign off line for this episode.
Keep it popping.
You heard it, everybody, and you heard it here first. Keep it poppin', and we will see you next week.